And then, of course, as I started reading around the literature of nationalism, because, you know, the study of nationalism is a big thing now. All of a sudden, in the face of globalization, people are beginning to become interested in nationalism again. Because one of the most interesting effects of globalization is not the disappearance of the nation state and not the disappearance of nationalist sentiments as everyone had predicted when globalization began in the 90s, but in fact in the intensification of nationalist feelings all over the world, Eastern Europe, Latin America, Asia, and so forth and so on. And as a result, people, beginning with Ben Anderson, that people have mentioned here already, who was also my teacher, by the way, started writing about nationalism and its origins. I thought that it was a way of, you know, once again returning to that question that I had left with, that I had momentarily abandoned in the first book, the question of translation and power, returning to those questions and linking it with this phenomenon of technology, particularly telecommunicative technology, as that which holds the possibility, the potential for regenerating a sense of national belonging by providing a common language, as I said, cut across different lines, different social divides. So this book is an attempt to bring together a cluster of concerns, right? The interest on translation, the interest on colonialism, resistances to colonialism, the interest around technology, telecommunicative technology, and at this time I was also beginning to read, as Moment indicated earlier, I was also beginning to read a lot of Heidegger, some of which I had read in the past and which I hadn't read before. So I started to reread a lot of, because Heidegger writes a lot of stuff on technology, and one of the best things to read on technology is Heidegger. And Heidegger seemed to offer a different understanding of technology that did not simply reduce technology to an instrument. In other words, a non-instrumental understanding of technology, which allowed me to get at a non-instrumental understanding of language. Right, so Momak says that he quotes Heidegger, he says Heidegger talks about language as the dwelling place of being. Right? So language is not just an instrument, a means of communication. Right? Language becomes the grounds upon which being itself can be conveyed and communicated. So that was just a really different formulation. So it was a way. This was a book. It was a way of bringing. At the same time, I was reading a lot of Derrida, and the Derridian underpinnings of this book is pretty obvious. So I'm not going to talk about all this other stuff, but this is just to give you a sense of where the book is coming from. So with that in mind, let me then proceed to talk about the book that nobody has read, except for here, and address the criticisms about this book. Let me start in the order that I read them. At 5 o'clock this morning, because I couldn't sleep because of jet lag, and started writing some notes, which are only slightly coherent. So I hope you'll pardon me the sort of informal nature of these notes, and of course, informal here is a nice way of saying disorganized and barely coherent. Okay, first Gary's comments. Gary provides a very succinct and I think very precise summary of some of the major themes covered in the book. And I thank him for that, because I think he does a great service of just summarizing a book and touching on all the major themes. However, he has a very interesting criticism of the book towards the end, where he says that the book remains, quote unquote, silent. And the way translation can be, and this is, I'm quoting him, can be radicalized into an ethical technology or a strategic pedagogy. And here clearly he has the brilliant work of Carol Howe in mind. How many of you have read Carol Howe's book, Necessary Fictions? Excellent, brilliant book. She's one of the best literary historians of all now. I urge you to read her work on this. Really fantastic stuff. Anyway, so he says, okay, the book is. It doesn't do this. It remains silent. As I said, how translation can be radicalized into an ethical technology or strategic pedagogy. Therefore, he faults the book for what he says a lack of political criticism. The book isn't political enough, and it doesn't seem to provide a way to think about translation in a much more political fashion. I think by politics here, correct me if I'm wrong, by politics you mean something that is interventionary, transformative, and not simply transformative, not transformative in a superficial way, but transformative in a radically effective sort of way. And what that means, radical. You know, it's just so, that word is so, at its roots, no? Overturning of existing social relations and that sort of thing. Now, if this were indeed the case, the book would indeed constitute a very, very serious lapse in the book. But I would suggest to you that, in fact, Gary's concern with the political and pedagogical uses of translation is in fact addressed in the book. In the chapters on the Solidaridad, chapter 1, and the chapters on Rizal's novel, The Fury and the Noli. In some ways, these chapters are all about the ways by which translation consistently fails to yield the recognition that the Filipinos demand from Spain, because these chapters are all about how the Ilustrados, who are of course very fluent in Spanish, in some ways more fluent and more knowledgeable in Spanish than the Spaniards themselves, speak Spanish and consistently meet with befuddled, puzzled looks from Spaniards, if not laughter and so forth and so on. So there's a constant failure of translation. See, the Ilustrados imagine themselves to be Filipinos, but Filipinos, of course, at this point remains a kind of overseas Spaniard. Right? What is a Filipino this way? Filipinos are overseas Spaniard. In other words, they want equal rights with the Spaniards. They want all the rights that a Spanish citizen would have. Initially they want the Philippines to become a province of Spain. Right? So in that sense, they see Filipinos as not colonial subjects. They see Filipinos as Spanish citizens. Ergo, Rizal and company saw themselves as overseas Spaniards. The way, for example, overseas Filipinos regard themselves as equal to the Filipinos here, right? The idea of separating from Spain and forming an independent country still hasn't emerged yet. So the idea of citizenship, the idea of nationalism at this point among Filipinos in the early stages of nationalism is Spanish nationalism, not Filipino nationalism. Filipino nationalism is seen precisely as something continuous with Spanish nationalism. And of course at this point, Spanish nationalism itself is a contested notion, right? Because Spain itself, all kinds of stuff is happening. The 19th century, those of you who remember your Spanish history, the 19th century is a very contentious, very, very violent, very unsettled history. This is the point that it begins with the Napoleonic invasion. Napoleon invades Spain. Spain becomes a colony, basically. Spain becomes a colony of France, right? And then the Spaniards launch a guerrilla resistance against Spain. So it's very interesting. Long before the Filipinos resisted Spain at the turn of the century, the Spaniards themselves already had a history of anti-colonial guerrilla resistance against France. Right? In fact, some people have argued that Spanish guerrilla resistance against France under Napoleonic occupation constitutes the first example of a modern guerrilla movement in the world.